Welcome back, guys. My name is Johnny Hopper, and in this video I'm going to show you how to recover from an ACL injury. But before we begin, I do have to have a disclaimer. I'm not a medical professional or a PT. I've just torn my ACL 4 times, twice on my left knee, twice on my right knee. So I've been involved with a lot of PTs, and these are going to be the exercises that help me the most. So I'm going to relay the information to you, the audience. So right after surgery, your knee is going to be inflamed and swollen. So you shouldn't exercise, you should just rest. I like to use RICE, rest, ice, compression, and elevation to try to get that swelling to go down. And right around the week, I would say you're okay to get off the crutches. I know some people get off crutches after 3 days, some people take 2 weeks. It's your discretion, but I wouldn't like to see you on crutches for a month or more, because typically with an ACL, you don't need to baby it that much. So after that first week, you can get in the gym, and depending upon what surgery they did, whether they took your patella tendon, your hamstring, a cadaver, those are the only 3 I know about. There's another one. Your PT is probably going to hook you up to an NMES system. This is a TENS unit and NMES. You can buy these online. They do range between $50 to about $500. This particular model is right around $250, but you need it for the NMES because right after surgery, sometimes you lose the function of flexing your quad. So this system will stimulate the muscles and it'll force you to flex. Man, that's kind of hurting a little bit. My quad is not near as strong as my other one because of some of the injuries that I've recently had on it, but this system tries to help teach you how to reflex your hamstring and your quad. And your goal should be for 2 weeks to almost 3 weeks to get 90 degrees range of motion in your knee. And one way to help do that is you have to have extension and flexion. So for extension, you could sit on your bed, you could use ankle weights, you could even use pillows because you're still going to be hurting quite a bit at this moment. But all you're going to do is you're going to lay down, but you're going to put your knees at the edge of the bed, and those ankle weights are going to try to force your knee into extension. And it's going to feel uncomfortable, but I would like to see you do this for 30 seconds at a time, maybe 5 or 6 times a day. At least that's what I did with my ACLs, and it helped immensely. So our goal here is to get our leg at 180 degrees of extension. And the reason why we do that is because after surgery we have so much built up blood and scar tissue. If we just leave our leg, it's going to grow that scar tissue and it's going to be hard cartilage, and you're not going to have that flexion that you need. So you need to do both. You need to do flexion, extension to move that blood out of the way so it doesn't become this like hard, almost bone-like material inside your leg, which stops it from moving anywhere. Because if you don't do anything, it is going to lock up and your leg is going to be stuck in that position. So the next is we're going to work on flexion, and I'll show you some exercises that I did that helped a bunch to try to get right around that 90 degrees. Alright, so I used a bicycle. You could even use a rower to try to get more flexion in your knee. This is going to, again, be a little bit of painful at the time, so use your body. If it's too painful, don't do it. I know all my PTs, they say, forget that, no pain, no gain. Your body's telling you something. So you do have a lot going on. Your body's trying to heal, so we don't want to push it too much because it's just going to irritate, inflame, and it's going to honestly make your recovery longer. So a bicycle is nice because you can change the seat height. So you can start off with the seat height fairly high so that when you're trying to roll backwards or pedal forward, your knee is flexing. All right, and this is, I'm past 90 degrees right now, but obviously I've got the seat a little bit lower. But you can go all the way down eventually, and this is what really helped me get close to full range, is you just would sit back here, go until it kind of hurts, and keep going, and your body is going to fight itself. You're going to want to try to lift up off to try to get this thing to go all the way around, and that's okay. All right, we're going to take little wins. So in 3 weeks, you should have right around 90 degrees. All right, another good one is being on your knees. This might be too painful, especially if you had the patella tendon taken out for your ACL. So this one might not be in your cards if that's your surgery, but it's just trying to sit back down onto your heels. I still love this exercise because of what I've done with my leg just over the past couple of years. This helps out quite a bit. And obviously, you could lean up against a wall. You could lean up against a wall, and then you can just push your knee closer to you. And each time, it's going to feel stiff, but then you just keep going a little bit more and a little bit more. And honestly, one of the tricks that PTs have helped me is if you have somebody helping you, you fight against. So you try to go into extension for a couple seconds and then stop going into extension and release, and you can honestly go farther. So you fight against yourself, and then you let go, and then you can get a little bit more. Fight against yourself, stop fighting, and then push a little bit more, and that'll help. All right, so after we have 90 degrees in flexion, and it's been 3 weeks or so, we can now start building up the muscles around. You know, obviously our quad is going to be fairly atrophied, our hamstring as well, and everything is still going to be fairly irritated, and it's going to hurt. So we don't want to do any jumping. We're probably barely walking at this time, but we can start exercising those muscles. A good one is just doing a static hold up against the wall. This one might be too difficult at the time, but this one, doing 3 sets of 30 seconds every other day, would be a good one to do. And then still, we're right around that 6 weeks, okay? So right around 6 weeks, we're still building those muscles. We can use some TRX straps or anything. You could use one of these bands, and you could put them over your door. You could even use a little rope or a belt would help. But basically, we're going to start off slow. We're just going to go into a squat and have these things help us get up. And as we get better, well, we can get off of one leg, and we can go down, and we can try to push up, okay? That's a good one that is going to help stability around the knee. All right, so ideally you want to have a chair that has wheels on it, but this is a good exercise. Even if you have, everyone that has probably a dirt bike, you're probably going to have some sort of a chair in the garage to put tools on and slide on. So all you're doing is you're just going to sit on it, and you're just going to push back with your legs. All right, your hurt ACL recovery leg, this one's going to be difficult to do, but this one helps immensely as well. So I'm going to have my buddy Randy demonstrate this for us. He just had ACL surgery. Well, not just had, but it's been about 4 months, and we've been working with him to get his strength back. And this next one is going to be Superman hamstring curl. So Randy, why don't you get down? And all you're going to do is, if you can stay on your knees, you want to bend down on your knees, and I'm going to hold his ankles down, and he's going to try to keep his back, his abs tight, and he's going to try to keep his torso straight. So I'm going to hold him, and Randy, why don't you go ahead and demonstrate? And he's not going to be able to go super far, but then he's going to pull himself back, and this is going to really tighten your hamstrings back there, and especially if you had ACL surgery where they took your hamstring, this one is going to probably hurt. It might take a little while for you to build up to get this down, but this is a good exercise for you to do. And ideally, you want to go as far down as you can. And Randy, why don't you go as far and bail? So you can't always go as far, but if I wasn't holding his ankles, he wouldn't be able to do this. So Randy, why don't you demonstrate doing it wrong, where you let your hips bend? Okay. Yeah, so you don't want to do that. You want to stay straight up. So your butt and your body's got to go straight as you're going. So one more, Randy. In here, I would try to do 3 sets of 10. These are hard. Even if you're healthy, these are tough. And if you're involved in any sort of a gym membership, you probably have a leg extension machine that you can do. But if you don't, you can use one of these little bands and you can make your own with a chair to try to do leg extension. And basically you're just going to do the same thing as far as just try to extend out, and this is just building that quad back up. And everything around, all your ligaments, your MCL, your LCL, especially your ACL, things are going to be tender. It might be a little bit uncomfortable. So I keep saying throughout this video, things are probably going to hurt. What I'm trying to get across is just being uncomfortable. We don't want it to be painful, but it's okay for it to be uncomfortable, because we need the muscles to do something, and your body's just telling you, hey, I don't necessarily like doing this, but I need to do this. If it gets to be any sharp pain, I want you to stop and just go back to rest, ice, compression, and elevation. And then when you're still right around that 6 weeks to 2 months, you can start trying to do stabilization when it comes to your recovery. And you can use a ball at the gym, but basically you'll probably start just on one leg. You can be next to a wall, and you're just trying to stay stable, moving back and forth. All right, this is going to put a lot of stress on your ligaments, your MCL, your LCL, and then your ACL. But this is one that you should implement in. And you can make these stabilization exercises as advanced as you want with being on whatever it may be. You don't have to have, see, I can't even do it with not having a ball or anything on my foot, but you're just going to make it harder by trying to throw something up against the wall. And again, 3 sets of 15 or so would be good. All right, and the last exercise that I think you should be doing right around that 6 weeks to 2 months is just simple lunges. You don't have to necessarily have weight, but the goal here is to try to get your knee all the way down, okay? You might start off where you're doing these small little lunges. That's okay, trust me, you just had surgery, it's gonna take a while. But the goal should be to be doing full lunges, deep lunges. And then obviously then you could hold dumbbells or whatever you may want as far as how heavy you want to do these with. All right, so then when you're about halfway through your recovery, right around 3 months to that 6 months, now you can start implementing a lot of side lunges and jumping. So we could use a box jump to jump to practice. You could use that. You could also just practice jumping without anything. And then as you get better, well, you can start trying to go farther. Okay? And still, side lunges is really good too, because we want to strengthen the ligaments so that we don't tear our ACLs again. So this is probably one of the most important parts of recovery, is we want to make sure that this injury doesn't happen again, and we want our body to be just as strong, if not stronger, after the injury. So side lunges is a good way to make up the strength in those ligaments, all right? So you can practice by jumping side to side, and then again, forward and back. And this is something that you should do, okay? So even if you're feeling great, I know I started riding after 2 months after some of my ACLs, was not a good idea. I would recommend what the doctor says as far as waiting the full 6 months. Nowadays, I'm hearing that they're talking about a year after ACL surgery. All right, so another exercise when jumping is getting fairly easy is you could use a cable machine at the gym, all right? Or if you don't have a gym, if you're in a CrossFit gym like I am, you can just use these bands. But you just basically ride it around the rig, and then you're gonna do the same exercises that we just went over as far as jumping and the side lunges. And you wanna do both sides, all right? Use both legs, because it's gonna help, it's just gonna help all around.
Alright, well I did it though.